Modern conflict has been a tale of two capabilities. On one hand, exquisite systems have been able to prove their worth. For billions of dollars and decades of research and development, you can effect decisive outcomes to overmatch your opponents or inspire so much fear that conflict is prevented altogether. On the other end of the spectrum, you have inexpensive, easily producible drone-based countermeasures who instead try to defeat the exquisite systems at a fraction of the cost. The risk is high. The modern warfighter's exposure to both types of these systems is increasingly higher. Hello, I'm Clayton Williams, Managing Director of IQT's London office. I have had the privilege of working with many founders who are driving force behind the technology that is rapidly becoming the first line of defense and increasingly offense in modern warfare. One of these companies is Auterion. Today, I'm joined by Lorenz Meier, co-founder and CEO, and Rob Rainhart, Auterion's Chief Operating Officer, who joined the company in 2024 from another military-first company, Hawkeye 360. We plan to discuss Auterion's journey in a two-part podcast. The first half is historical, to discuss how we ended up with the unmanned systems that are at the heart of the changing doctrines of modern warfare. And the second part will discuss what is happening today in the evolution of drone technology. And perhaps Lorenz and Rob can provide a glimpse into where it all might go next. Lorenz, Rob, welcome to IQT's podcast. We'll spend the next half hour or so diving deep into the history of Auterion, which is essentially biographical with Lorenz. So maybe we'll kick off with Rob. Rob, for those who are coming into this topic with a clean slate and new to drones, what is Auterion? What does the company do? And how is it different from the other 1,000 drone vendors operating today?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Clayton. I'm really excited to be here and have the opportunity to share the story of Auterion, my perspective of the company, and the path forward there. I mean, look, what Auterion's doing is really exciting, and it really focuses on autonomy and providing the ecosystem for autonomy at scale. I mean, that's what they're doing. That's what this company is doing. That's what we're doing here. And drones are a major part of that. We've all seen the dynamics of the battlefield change over the last 3+ years of the Ukraine war and the impact that's had on battlefield operations and efficiencies. 80% of all casualties are drone related. That's a different paradigm, and Auterion is at the center of that autonomy for that. So what we provide is the ecosystem, the software, the platforms to be able to enable that and do that at scale. That's what we do.
Amazing. So Lorenz, hello. Let's wind the clock back. It's 2007. Arduino, an Italian motherboard company, comes out with their hobbyist, product that enables a drone to know where it is and what it's doing. It has accelerometers, gyroscopes, all the different things that you need in order to understand how to fly. So it really enables the small unmanned system, right? Where are you and what are you doing in 2007?
So I was still doing my bachelor's back then in computer science, and I think that's the first giveaway here. A lot of drone people are aerospace or mechanical engineering. And I looked at that, and what I didn't like about it was that it was an 8-bit processor at, I think if I recall correctly, something like 16 megahertz. And I'm like, well, state of the art is ARM, 32-bit. What are we doing here? And if you're young and ambitious and maybe a little bit overconfident, you're like, how hard can this be to build an autopilot? And that's what I embarked on together with a team that I led of 14 students. And we did end up building successfully our own avionics and our own software stack, open source, with the help of some existing open source libraries, standing on the shoulders of giants. But we were very successfully flying just a year later. And what is actually really special about that moment in time is that the prices of inertial MEMS sensors and their integration level changed dramatically. Initially, it was several $100s for a kit. For just 3-axis gyros, accelerometers. They were all discrete parts, so one chip per axis. You had to mount them in like circuit boards that were mounted perpendicular. And then a year later, smartphone sensors were out, and cost was under $20. Today, it's way less. And that is why that was such a pivotal moment. Not just because I happened to do my studies back then, but also because the price point reduced by 10x, and that really started the drone revolution.
So was that I guess an obvious moment? You have a drone, it's capable of flight, and then let's make this thing operate independently of any pilot. Was there like an aha moment where you said, hey, let's, the swap or the compute is capable of doing this. Let's try it.
So you have to, I just want to remind us all, like 2007, 2008, we were at the point where people were asking, why do I need a web browser on my phone?
Right. Good point.
So we weren't even talking about app stores yet. And so at that time, I came at drones from a completely different perspective. I didn't care so much about the flying part. I did actually want to build an autonomous system that could move with computer vision autonomously in indoor environments initially, and then we moved outdoors. And I just found drones more fascinating than wheeled robots. Like in a parallel universe, I might have just gone the easy route and just built a wheeled robot and just did computer vision there, but I didn't. And so all of this avionics design, integrated system design, the fact that we built already then onboard computer vision was because that was the goal. And building the avionics, building the communication protocol, building PixArc, building Mavlink, building Q ground control, those were all just tools to get to robotics.
Yeah, that's really interesting. It's kind of bizarre in a way that the UAV systems, with all their flexibility and undefined boundaries, is really leading the way as opposed to wheeled robotics or ground robotics or even sea robotics. It's almost like the hardest problem was the most interesting one to solve out of the gates, and we're kind of working backwards from there.
I think that's true. On the other hand, once you start to get into navigation, like navigation in the open 3D space is way easier than on the ground. And so, yes, you need to stay airborne, and that's hard. But then you've actually normalized your problem in a really great way. It's like it doesn't quite matter in which part of the air you are, within limits, of course. Whereas on the ground, you immediately run into a wicked hard problem. And I think that's something I realized really quickly, and what drew me towards drones and away from auto robotics domains.
Sorry for interrupting. I think maybe that's also plays back to your position as a computer scientist, and it's easier to deal with the physical barriers that mud and water might provide in a platform. Rob, at the same time, you were kind of embarking on a different journey. Hawkeye 360 was a platform that provides signals intelligence from space, and is now trying to offer this as a somewhat of a commercial service. So you're working military first, backwards to commercial. Maybe you could just touch on some of those lessons that maybe added value back to Auterion in its current position.
Yeah, I mean, I think anytime you're coming to market with a commercial service that then has defense and intelligence applications, I think there's a whole bunch of things that come to mind from just a value perspective there. I think for me, my fascination was always about, and has been for probably the last couple of decades, around companies that decide to invest in technology and capability that then has applied use within defense and intel. And, certainly in the early days of Hawkeye 360, there was, a view of a commercial, we're going to track things. We're going to do, we're going to track ships. We're going to do all this stuff. But then we very quickly found that, the real market was defense and intel. I mean, period. That's where the real market was for the applications. And I see a lot of the same parallels in terms of the conversation and the path that Lorenz and Auterion has taken, where, certainly there was a commercial enterprise path, and then defense takes off. And those two things benefit each other, right? So it's not absolute one or the other, but they go through kind of cycles in terms of the benefit there. And so the commercial path is what leads to the idea that then folds back into, holy cow, this has broad applicability, from a defense and intel perspective. And I think the thing that I see parallels of is there's a price point and a cost point for what we did at Hawkeye. And the same thing I see over here on Auterion, which is, we're really focusing as a business on making this economical for the users to get up very quickly at scale and get access to a source of data that's there. The last thing that's parallel there, unclassified attributable systems, right? We haven't built this based upon defense industrial base in the United States know-how. It's completely commercial from that perspective. And then it has broad applicability that folds back into the defense and intel. And those are kind of the three pillars that I think about the market, the development, and how that aligns in those areas. And it's a fascinating matrix. And I think you're going to see this more and more as certainly in the US, as the US government looks to move faster on procurement and faster at deploying, they have to rely on private capital and companies that have invested at expense to develop a capability there, right? And so I think you're going to see that accelerate more as the demand is there on a time scale that's much shorter, right? And that's what leads to this kind of these companies being able to exist and exist in a way that is profitable and growing in a healthy way.
Yeah, it's interesting you mentioned that. As a VC who runs a European office, we have a lot of discussion as to what an investor can or cannot invest in, and military tech has always been kind of the red button issue. And is it dual use? Is it not? And in 2019, in our original investment, we were investing in a commercial company. I mean, Auterion, I don't believe, unless you can correct me, Lorenz, I don't believe at that time, maybe it was the very beginnings of saying, hey, there might be an opportunity within government and defense, but maybe you can talk about that journey, because sometimes you may not have invested in a military technology, but you end up with one because these are not exclusive to one domain or another. Maybe you can touch on some thoughts there, Lorenz.
I think I think our relationship with defense was pretty much there from day one, but it has changed in nature, because initially my view on the company's position was, well, the government is an important driver of innovation. And so we had worked very, very early with DIU on the short range recon program. So an Army program of record, not actually just RDT&E, around the time where In-Q-Tel invested. Now, that looked like leading edge technology development that would benefit the commercial sector. We didn't see a huge volume because Army was talking about a few hundred drones, and you can't build a venture-backed business on a few hundred drones. But we saw it as an opportunity to prove ourselves and as a really strong reference customer. And I've enjoyed our working relationship with In-Q-Tel and with DIU over the past years. In fact, I'm working so long with both organizations that most of the people I started to work with have cycled out or retired or have completely different jobs like yourself. So I think, like, for me, that was always something I was excited about doing, but I didn't expect that it would become not just a major part of our business. That was always the realm of the possible, but become way bigger than we ever imagined the overall potential to be. Because now it's not crazy for us to think about powering millions of drones. We're on the ramp there. And and suddenly drones are not a specialty soft capability for the most important missions. No, they're now the backbone of munitions employed in war, and that is nobody could have predicted that part.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I kind of refer to it as like the years of the wilderness, that you were able to navigate. Where, I think government knew that it needed to set standards for interoperability. It needed to have flexible systems, but contrasting that to your commercial market, which is heavily constrained by regulators and control, and wanting to have no flexibility, therefore they could certify a fleet, and it strikes me as that must have been an incredibly challenging time to navigate the company between those two push-pull, market dynamics.
I think, it has left us in an interesting position, because I think of us as a 2-year-old company that is leading in attritable loitering munition software for them that has a 5-year technological advantage.
Yeah.
and that's basically possible because we've stayed true to our mission of building the common software platform, and that has allowed us to pivot away from markets really quickly that were not successful. So we scaled with initial inspection and mapping, and that was good for the initial scale up. We have worked through cargo. We're still present with major customers in cargo. That hasn't gone away. And now we're not just ISR, but strike is becoming a mass phenomenon in defense. We're able to really scale with that. And so for us, we made this decision 2 years ago to not just accept, but really embrace strike, drones, loitering munitions, and really push for that. And it has completely transformed the company.
Yeah, I imagine in more ways than one. I mean, if I think about the same time frame, if we're doing this comparison to, you mentioned the web browser in 2007. In 2017 or so, that was right around the time when Google was struggling with its own defense contracts and the Maven kind of drama, and as a European company in Zurich at the time, how did you navigate the shift towards I guess a military first or a defense first company as opposed to a dual use company?
I think we always had a strong defense angle that just increased. 2017, 18, we assumed that's R&D, then it turned into programs of record, then it turned into more programs of record. And so, it was a build that actually felt totally natural. And because for us, that was always a customer we were very proud of. I think it is actually more about focus and putting focus, in particular in loitering munitions, putting focus on the go-to-market, forward deployed at the front lines in Ukraine, than so much about like this being totally new. It's not like the company was thrown into cold water and had to figure out like, okay, where do we go here? But it's of course a shift, and I find it interesting that I've seen a lot of drone efforts of major corporations and companies like GoPro come and go in the same time frame, and we've seen quite a few commercial drone companies go out of business in the last few years, and we have been on a constant build, increasing revenue year over year. To a point where we're now literally on the hockey stick.
So what did they do? What did they do wrong? Was it just an inflexibility or a nimbleness that they stuck to the old customer set or problems of yesterday? Like what happened that caused so many to fail where you guys are still
Well, I think there are really two strategic things. One is we built our government go-to-market team in 2018. Like basically the first year of operation. And for us, it wasn't like just DARPA. It was like, we want to serve Army, Marine Corps, DoD, So we're really in that domain and won contracts every year and extensions every year. Okay. So that's one piece. So it's kind of hard to build a defense go-to-market out of nothing and a reputation out of nothing. And so when you are starting to struggle as a company, pivoting towards it is then, usually too late. And so we were able to just go with the market dynamics with a team that was in place. I think that's one thing. The other thing, it's way easier if you build software to pivot to a different application, to a different form factor, because you don't have that factory sitting there and the inventory, which is literally what happened to a number of enterprise drone companies that you thought you're going to sell, and then there was an initial ramp, and then it doesn't happen. And I've seen, I think, like 3 or 4 ramps in my years in industry. First towards consumer, it didn't happen and got taken away by China. Then commercial, there I think it was actually more initial enterprise excitement where everybody was working off the chief innovation officer budget. And then when the chief innovation officer pivoted to crypto or whatever they pivoted to, the budget went away.
Yep.
And people thought that's a pilot program and it's going to be 10 times as large next year, and it never happened. And also, like for a lot of the surveying drones, if you think about it, like a lot of surveyors have surveying drones and use them regularly. The problem is they last for 4 years. Right. So you have the initial adoption and then they're around and they don't go anywhere. And they only get marginally better, a little bit like your phone gets marginally better every year. So it's not like you're going to make twice the revenue as a surveyor if you buy the new drone next year. It's more a second order effect to your business. And so we've lived through all of that as a company, and then also starting to do cargo. But it was easy for us as a software company to pivot. And quite frankly, with defense, I think the same thing is going to happen. People are looking at this as a too monolithic space. And we will likely see iterations of very different types of drones over the next few years. And it's going to be hard for companies to keep pace because they continuously need to revise their designs. I'm actually enjoying a lot watching airframes or videos of airframes and looking at pictures from around 1945. You have to do that. You wouldn't believe what aerospace engineers cooked up in that period and what DoD funded. It's crazy. Like there are social media accounts that share 4K upscaled footage from that era, and it's bizarre. And I'm looking at today's defense tech industry and the drone industry. I'm like, okay, like we're in that same age where anything goes, anything with props that fly is a potential winner. But then if you zoom out, most of the companies have gone away. Most of these airframes have gone away. Most of the form factors have gone away. And that's why I believe we've taken the strategic view on the industry. Yes, our go-to-market is more complex because we need to do it with partners. But we've proven time and time again that we're not exposed to the industry churn, that everybody is exposed. And right now there's growth, yes, but there's for sure also consolidation around the corner. And maybe to add to that last point that we can expand on later, we're seeing completely different price points once customers hit volume. So the price point expectations in Ukraine are very different. Sure. DoD has taken notice, so they're willing to pay a Made in America premium, but that premium is not 10x, and prices are less than 10 times what current models cost. And so there is a reckoning around the corner on the willingness to pay for certain hardware components that will actually send shockwaves through our domestic US industry in the next year or so.
Yeah, that's I think we're going to dive into a lot of that. I think that's actually a really good teaser for the second half here. Rob, we're moving the clock forward. It's now February 2022. The invasion of Donbass has expanded into this full scale invasion of Ukraine. How does that fundamentally change Auterion? What do you do now that you didn't do then, and set us really up for a great lead in to get everyone hooked to listen to the next segment?
Yeah, I mean, I think at that point you're at a full scale war, right? You're not just at an incursion in a particular area. You have a full scale conflict that's regional, that's in the heart of Europe. There's a scale up mentality there around how are we going to combat Russia effectively, and for a company like Auterion, it's really about getting capability in the hands of users and working very quickly on the battlefield, getting the feedback from the users and understanding the threats, right? I think one of the things that happens in a company like Auterion and other companies that are operating in Ukraine, we're not trying to anticipate every single threat, every scenario, every outcome, and build a system to a set of very hard, stringent requirements up front. What we're trying to do is build a product that anticipates some of those things, but then get it to the front line and make the updates and make the adjustments that are really needed for the threats and the scenario, versus, holding back and doing a very long development to be able to do that. And it's a different mentality around how you deploy, push, and get systems out and get feedback from that and be able to iterate on that. So it's a very dynamic development environment that's extremely empowering, because what you're doing makes a difference on a daily basis for the users, and you feel that, you see that, you hear that, and makes a big difference.
So it's clear to me that innovation comes in cycles and waves, and at the very beginning of this was driven by the feasibility of the unmanned system for a hobbyist to mess around with, and the amount of innovation that occurred over the very short span of time that Lorenz, you stood up Auterion, was immense. And then there was this kind of lull in the middle as everything had to get a system, a standard, an implementation, customer buy-in, adoption, scale, all these things, and then boom, there's another conflict that inspires creativity, and some of that creativity may be collapsed down later, Lorenz, as you mentioned, with the different platforms, but another incredible boom of capability and the real advancement of what AI applied to these drone systems can bring, and that's all software driven.
Thanks both for joining us this far, and thanks to everyone for listening to this episode of IQT Explains, a series of the IQT Podcast. Subscribe for more, leave us a review, and visit www.iqt.org to learn how tech is shaping national security. And you can visit Auterion at www.auterion.com. Thanks.